The Denver Broncos absolutely nailed the 2024 NFL Draft, and we're going to tell you why on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country for tuning in and listening, making us your first listen of the day every single day here. Just a reminder, you can get Locked on Broncos for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So make sure you do us a favor, subscribe or follow so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team. Every single day, all year long, we have you covered. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. And really, today's episode, Locked on Broncos, we're going to look at what's next with the team following the NFL draft, which drafted players will play right away. But we're going to kick things off by talking about what we believe is a home run draft for the Denver Broncos. Sayre, the 2024 class is officially set in stone here for the Broncos. Really headlined by Bo Nix, which we did an episode on at the moment that it had happened. I came away from this draft overall feeling like this was a great draft, really from top to bottom here for Denver. Not to mention they also initiated a trade during the draft for the second year in a row. I think the common consensus amongst Broncos country is, hey, this was a very, very good draft on paper. Now, obviously, we have to let the results kind of play out. We got to see these players grow and develop. I'm not going to be throwing out any grades yet, but I tell you what, on paper, this looked like an absolute home run of a draft by Sean Payton and George Paton here.
Yeah, and it really feels like the whole offseason, we've kind of been maybe looking at 4 or 5 puzzle pieces, and now that the draft is complete, like we see the finished puzzle in a way. Like the roster has come together. I think it's given Broncos country a lot of renewed optimism, so to speak, Cody. I think a lot of people after the draft and after especially the John Franklin Myers trade, like you mentioned, they may have been going and smashing the over on, I believe people are saying 5.5 wins right now. So maybe you want to go place a bet on that. I don't want to lose any money on your behalf, but man, if I was a betting man, I'd be smashing the over on 5.5 wins this year. And not to be caught up in the moment or anything like that. But Cody, you and I have talked about this. I mean, you raise the floor of the defensive front. I think you raise the floor of the team overall. You get a quarterback who's going to come in. And what are the things that Sean Payton loves so much about him, right? He doesn't make a ton of mistakes. He doesn't take a lot of sacks. He gets the ball out quickly. And frankly, Cody, the underrated storylines that nobody's really talking about right now. The Broncos didn't trade Courtland Sutton. I mean, what's the deal with that? Where do we go from here? What other free agents could they continue to add? I love the makeup of this draft class. I think that you and I both agreed going in, the Broncos needed a lot of instant contributors from this class. You can't have necessarily guys coming in that, well, this guy's going to take 2-3 years to develop, or we'll see where he's at in 2025. It feels like a lot of this class is going to come in and play right away.
Well, the idea that George and Sean had said before the draft is, hey, we're trying to build this team now going forward by drafting and developing these guys. And obviously, you're going to utilize free agency when it matters. But, I mean, let's take a look at this. Bo Nix, obviously, their first-round pick. They didn't pick again until pick number 76 in round 3. They go out and they get Jonah Elliss, edge rusher out of Utah, which, I mean, he went on an absolute tear last year in a 4-game stretch in terms of tackles for a loss behind the line of scrimmage. I believe he had 8 sacks, if I'm not mistaken, in 4 games as well. But then he suffered a torn labrum. He kind of played through it, ended up getting surgery, didn't get to really compete at the combine or the Utah Pro Day, but he had his own personal pro day, and he kind of blew people away there. But he's also a guy, if you've watched any Pac-12 football, which I don't think a lot of people, if you, especially on the East Coast, a lot of people on the East Coast don't watch Pac-12 football. They're not staying up that late to watch those games. So, a lot of these guys, they don't know who these Pac-12 players are, but it's like Pac-12 produces some really damn good athletes. I mean, if you look at this year's draft, look, everyone was talking about SEC is the best. Look, SEC is great. Don't get me wrong. But the Pac-12 has always produced elite level NFL talent. And Utah is also another pipeline school that seemingly churns out guys who can compete at the highest level when they go from college to the pros. Elliss is a very, very exciting prospect to watch. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of questions that are going to come up with that and how it impacts the rotation, how it impacts the room. We're not going to dive into all that today because, look, we got you covered through the next couple of weeks here with draft content and recap of everything that's going on. But then you go and you get Troy Franklin on day 3. I mean, Denver trading up. I mean, to be honest with you, Sayre, I was out taking my dog to the restroom when this had happened because it was pouring snow and raining like crazy in Denver. I saw it was Troy Franklin. I'm like, wow, they're really going all in here to get this offense built around really what Bo Nix does well. But for a guy like Troy Franklin, who's very talented, slid a little bit in this draft, I really like this pick as well. And then they just nailed it the rest of the way overall through the draft. I mean, this was a really, really good draft on paper.
It was. You love that. I heard Sean Payton talking after the draft, and him and George Payton are like, I think George even said, Sean, he kind of likes to sleep in. So I knew when I got a text from him at 6 a.m. that something was going on. He wanted to trade up for Troy Franklin. So I guess you can pound the table and say Sean Payton is one of us. Fun. Like that kind of stuff. You pair up the quarterback that you just took in the first round, and we always want to see, man, how are you going to surround that quarterback with the proper talent, or how are you going to support that pick? The Broncos go out and immediately you get a pass rusher. Let's say, hey, we want to get off the field on third downs a little bit quicker. We're going to have a deeper pass rush rotation, and then you go get his number 1 target at the college level. I mean, I love that strategy. I always love it when teams draft college teammates. It doesn't always work out in the NFL today, but hey, I mean, you can't help but just want those kinds of things to happen. Like, hey, it's a perfect fit. Troy Franklin, he's going to come in, give some more speed, some more playmaking ability to that receiver position. On day 3, Cody, after the Troy Franklin pick, the Broncos had back-to-back selections in the 5th round. I know we'll talk about Chris Abrams-Drain, but I think you and I both believe that Audric Estime from Notre Dame, the second-team All-American, 18 rushing TDs last year, that pick right there could end up being the steal of this draft for the Denver.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. I mean, and I remember watching some Notre Dame games last year, and I was like, this guy he's not explosive. He's not like super fast, but man, he runs through guys, and he's got really quick change of direction. But he drags dudes, right? And look, I think I envision the moment that they made this. I think a lot of people made the assumption, okay, well, they're going to move on from Javonte Williams. I don't think that's going to be the plan. I think more so you're going to feature Javonte and Audric Estime as a 1-2 punch. And look, Sean Payton even said something. We'll dive a little bit deeper into, the vision for him here in a little bit, but I watched him run for 4 touchdowns against Stanford, over 200 yards in their last game of the season. And I was like, man, this guy is explosive. He's got that burst. And he's a fun player to watch. And then I feel like personality-wise, Denver got a lot of really good guys in this draft as well. And then even just like maybe an underrated guy in round number 7, we'll talk about Devon Vele out of Utah in kind of a Tim Patrick build, according to Sean Payton. So, I mean, overall, Denver was able to really kind of build their depth in a lot of key areas. But in my opinion, my main takeaway that I'm going to leave here is that I feel like this draft specifically for Denver is going to set up the next 3 to 4 years for them in terms of how they're going to build this roster. And I think overall on paper, you look at this roster specifically drafted, I think that's a pretty solid young foundation, especially if you're building around a young guy in Bo Nix, who you believe is going to be your franchise quarterback. I feel like Denver nailed this draft. And look, Broncos Country, Sayre and myself, we want to hear from you as well in terms of your thoughts on this draft class here by George Payton, Sean Payton. We think it's a home run out of the park here, but time will tell. We have to let the results play out for themselves. But we are going to dive a little bit deeper into which drafted players we believe will have the best chance to play right away. You're going to get that here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And as you all know, at FanDuel, they are America's #1 sportsbook. And right now is the perfect time to get in on the action. You want to know why? Because it's playoff time in the NBA. It's playoff time in the NHL. Plus, baseball season is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. The Denver Nuggets are looking to close out at home against the Los Angeles Lakers in Game 5. Can they do that? Well, if you believe in Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets being able to round out the series, you can put money on the money line for the Denver Nuggets. If you believe in player props, you can go for a Nikola Jokic triple-double stat projection, all within the FanDuel Sportsbook app. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. Today's Locked On Broncos is also brought to our friends over there at the Game Time app. And look, Game Time, they're now an authorized marketplace of Major League Baseball. Plus, you can go see local events that are going on in your area, whether it's comedy, theater, concerts, or you know what? The Denver Nuggets right now, they're going to host another playoff game at home at Ball Arena. And Game Time is the place where you can go and get tickets for your next event. The thing I love about Game Time, look, they have a variety of different things, last minute deals where you can save up to 60% on buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater, all in price. And where if you toggle this feature, it shows you your total upfront, which leaves you with no surprises when you go to checkout. You see exactly what you're going to pay. Plus, you get views from your seat of the vantage point of the action in which you're going to be attending the event, where you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app just before you buy. And they also have the lowest price guarantee, because if you find a price out there that's better than what Game Time is offering, they will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Once again, terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
There's going to be quite a few rookies on this Denver Broncos roster playing right away in 2024. Cody and I are going to tell you about exactly which rookies you can expect to have big roles on this team coming up this season. But Broncos Country, want to say thank you and give a shout out to all of you that make Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. As we're here in the offseason, the excitement of the NFL draft, you know that you can count on Locked On Broncos every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, free and available everywhere that you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube, where you can watch the show and sound off with other members of Broncos Country. Let's talk about instant impact, Cody, because when you get an NFL draft class coming in, of course, everybody says, you know, you got to wait 3 years at least to really, quote unquote, grade this class, which I agree with. You got to give these guys time to play. You got to give them time to play out there. But let's talk about the potential of instant impact, because I think that's so often what these grades that are arbitrarily just thrown out there, and the fact that you see some people out there who love this draft in the national media and some others that hate it, probably tells you that it's pretty good, but it's somewhere in between, right? It's probably just a pretty good draft overall. Let's talk about instant impact, because that's where these grades come from. Who do you see making the biggest impact year one from the Denver Broncos rookie class?
You know, I feel like a lot of it has to be on the offensive side of the ball, which, look, Denver just needed the biggest boost of productivity on that unit specifically. There's 3 players I'll highlight here that I feel like will contribute heavily this upcoming season. That's obviously Bo Nix, who I think is going to be the day one starter. He should be. I think this draft is a really big indicator of that and all the plans there. I think Troy Franklin will have a big boost inside of the offense alongside Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton for now, Marvin Mims, and Josh Reynolds. Look, you got really, I think that's a very loaded room right now with talent, especially if Cortland stays in the mix. I think there's going to be a lot of guys who can have an impact, role right away. And I think Audric Estime, in terms of the run game, it's needed a big boost here, Sayre. They get a guy who's physical. He can run through contact. He's got short burst explosiveness in between the tackles, good ball carrier vision. The thing I want to highlight here about Estime is, like, when you look at him at Notre Dame in the last 2 seasons, he's got 29 rushing touchdowns in just 2 years. Big body. And, I hate trying to make comparisons to other players, but like when I look at him and I watch his tape and I see him run, I think of Leonard Fournette in a lot of different ways. And I think that's very exciting. Look, not saying he's going to be Leonard Fournette or have that type of impact that, Lombardi Lenny did here. But man, this is a guy who looks fun to watch. He looks like a bruiser of a tailback, and Denver needs that type of guy to complement alongside Javonte Williams. And like, I also look at it as well, the vision for him, according to Sean Payton, first down, second down type of runner, or even short yardage situations. There's times we've seen the Broncos utilize 2 backs in the backfield this past season with Sean Payton. What can Sean do with this offense even more if you have 2 sizable guys in there? Plus, his size alone, I think, gives you a boost in pass protection options, especially in key passing situations, maybe on third down. I'm excited about that. I feel like those 3 offensive players probably have the biggest chance right now, Sayre, to have an impact in year one right away. How do you feel about, like, which players drafted could play right away or have an impact? And look, it can go beyond just offense and defense. We can even focus here on special teams as well.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a like you said, the offensive heavy. When you have a quarterback involved and a potential high impact running back, those 2 guys are going to be sort of the main focus, especially if you're like a fantasy football player out there that's wondering, hey, which some of these Broncos should I hoard on my fantasy roster? But I think defensively, Cody, it's going to be fascinating to see what Jonah Elliss, what kind of impact he has in the rotation, because we know Sean Payton said it after that pick was made. Like, sometimes you go into the draft, you want to strengthen a strength. They believe the edge room to be a strength of this team. Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, Baron Browning. And now you add in a guy like Jonah Elliss off the edge, who was very, very productive in the 100th percentile in terms of 3-cone, which means this guy is agile. He is quick. He's able to bend the corner very quickly. And what he does well, Cody, that I watched, and I watched a few Utah games after the selection was made, he gets on that flat plane towards the quarterback as well as anyone. Just ask Caleb Williams how good of a pass rusher Jonah Elliss is. He terrorized him multiple years in a row there when Utah played USC. So I think that those types of traits from him make you wonder, like, how quickly are the Broncos going to be able to get this guy 350, 450 snaps? I mean, we're talking about a rotation here off the edge. So you do expect that it's going to be maybe a slow going for somebody like that when you already have guys that are producing as pass rushers. But for the Broncos right now, I mean, beggars can't be choosers. Like, if the guy's got the hot hand, go with the guy that's got the hot hand. I expect him to have a role, and I don't want this to happen by any means. But what I'm about to say here, Jaquan McMillan, we hope he has an amazing year as the nickel cornerback. We believe that he's going to do that. In the event that there's another Isang Bassi type of situation on the Broncos' hands, I think Chris Abrams-Draine is going to be able to step into that slot role immediately for you. I think that he was projected, Cody, as some people had him in the top 100. Some had him as a, third to fourth, kind of just somewhere in between there. Broncos get him at the, near the top or the beginning portion of round 5. I think he could be a starting nickel sooner than later in the NFL if need be. But of course, we hope Jaquan has a great year too in Denver as a starter at that spot. But man, I think he would be ready to go if the need arises.
Well, and George and Sean had said too in the post-draft press conference, really with Abrams-Draine, is that this is a guy who's kind of like that hybrid flex outside guy, can play inside, a little undersized, 5'11", 179 pounds. But man, I tell you what, when you watch him, look, I'm a Mizzou grad out there as well. I look forward to getting to maybe catch up with him and seeing if we had any of the same professors there. But the one thing I want to, look at with him is going back and watching tape. He can play off ball coverage. He can play press man to man. I think he's very good at mirroring receivers off the line of scrimmage when he's playing press. I think his route recognition is very, very good. He's not afraid to come up and tackle on the run. But you have to factor in, like, right now, you're trying to figure out what that cornerback 2 thing is going to look like opposite of Patrick Surtain. And more, it's not going to be Abrams-Draine by any means. It's going to really be a competition, I think, right now, based on how things are, between Riley Moss, Damari Mathis, and veteran Levi Wallace, which isn't a bad thing, right? That gives you options. But then it also gives you an idea as to, okay, can this guy step in for us right away here on special teams, which I think that's probably going to be where he makes his hay early on to start. Because let's say Riley Moss starts or Damari Mathis starts. One of those guys, like whoever doesn't start, they're going to have to play gunner. They're going to have to play jammer. They're going to have to play all the core 4 special teams, especially with the new setup. But I also believe that, and this is a question that didn't get asked, with the new kickoff rules, I'm very curious to see maybe how Abrams-Draine can maybe fit into the mix here in that regard. And even like we talk about receiver types, like this gives the Broncos options, especially with Vele out of Utah as well. Big, sizable guy, good blocker. Can he get involved there as well? And so I think for me, we just have to let the vision play out. And look, I know here in a couple of weeks, the Broncos are going to hold their rookie minicamp. I'll be there. We'll obviously break down all the coverage here on Locked On Broncos exclusively here for everyone in Broncos country who's listening or watching wherever they get their podcast. But I feel like overall, if I had to look at this draft class right now on paper, I feel like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of your 7 picks, I feel like, Sayre, at this moment, can play or either going to start on offense, rotate on offense or defense, or play a lot on special teams. That's a pretty good hit rate while you still develop some of the other guys. And there's going to be a process here where some of these new young guys are going to push some of the guys that are already on the roster coming into the draft. And that's going to maybe get you an identity. Who's going to fit what Sean Payton wants the most? That is how you build a team. I'm very excited about it. And I guarantee you, like, it's going to be a lot of interesting conversations we're going to have here this offseason, especially as training camp comes up as well. But there are some questions, though, Broncos country, we're going to ask ourselves here after the NFL draft with this draft class specifically. What is next with the team after the NFL draft? Some of the biggest questions we have, including the status of Courtland Sutton. You're going to get that and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff that's going on inside this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends and participate in timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much more that you can get, like unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or you heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constant changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode of Locked On Broncos, we'll dive deep into what are the biggest questions remaining with this team following the NFL draft. Will we get some clarity on some positions? Will we get some clarity on how the Broncos plan to use some personnel? And could a fan favorite potentially return during this cycle of the offseason? Want to say thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. You can get us wherever you get your podcast, where you can watch us on YouTube. We appreciate you so much. A lot of exciting things coming up here, Locked On Broncos. There's a lot of excitement at Broncos Country following the NFL draft, to the point where I'm seeing memes where Broncos Country is like, I'm ready to be hurt again, or we're all the way back. That's exciting because, I mean, I tell you what, Sayre, like before we dive into the questions, I feel like the perception, let's say once free agency began, or like the build up to free agency, the idea and the perspective, I think, from so many fans on this roster was like in dire straits. Like, oh, this is just a terrible roster. I feel like the fan base has kind of really flipped a little bit. Like there's a lot of excitement that I'm seeing from members of Broncos Country, and that in turn has me excited overall. But, your thoughts on that, and then we'll kick it off with obviously the first question that we have here leading into obviously the post-draft process.
Well, it's kind of like I said at the top of the show, right? It's like you previously could only see a few pieces of the puzzle put together, and you're like, wait, what the heck is that? Is that a mountain range, or is it what? And it turns out it was nothing. It was actually a car that you were putting together, a puzzle of a car or something like that. And you're like, oh, I see now what this puzzle was supposed to be. I had no idea. I think that's kind of what the offseason is like before you see the full vision executed, right? And Sean Payton even said earlier this offseason, he's like, I'd rather have a little basically angst about the quarterback position or the roster right now as opposed to August, September. And I think it's going to be a nice breath. Like you can take a deep breath if you're Broncos Country, right? You can, okay, we've got a quarterback that the coach believes in. We've got a better defensive line. We added to the pass rush. We've got a pretty deep wide receiver room. The offensive line is, by all metrics, much better this past year than it has been in previous years. So there's a lot that goes into that, but I think that certainly you feel better about the roster now. Like I said, I'd be smashing the over on the 5.5 wins there. But let's talk about these young wide receivers that are coming in, Cody, because I mentioned it before. The idea that Courtland Sutton wasn't traded over draft weekend. The signs were all there. We got the report that said the Broncos don't plan to trade him. And then there was even on Saturday morning, I think Ian Rappaport of NFL Network had a report about the attention and the focus now shifts to Courtland Sutton after the Broncos, draft Troy Franklin. So as of right now, Sutton is on the roster. The Broncos added 2 young receivers. They brought back Tim Patrick. They brought in Josh Reynolds. Like, what the heck is going on there with that situation?
Yeah, there's so many different receivers on this roster now, with the addition of Franklin and Vele. But the question I have too, especially about Sutton, like I know a lot of people are like, okay, now that the Broncos drafted these guys, they can trade Courtland. I still feel like a guy like Bo Nix, Sayre, I feel like will be so much better with a guy like Courtland still on this roster right now. This could be, do you remember when Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas were on the roster and the Broncos go out in 2018? What do? They draft Courtland Sutton. They draft Deshaun Hamilton. And we're like, okay, hey, like, are these the eventual replacements to these two guys? In some context, it was a little bit, but also at the same time, Demaryius was still on the roster. Emmanuel was still on the roster. And we saw a lot of mentorship. Like I remember going to training camp in 2018, and I remember watching DT specifically work with Courtland Sutton on certain things, like helping all these young guys out. I hope Cortland has the opportunity to come do that this year, right? And look, we obviously understand the NFL is a business. He wants more guaranteed money, which, look, he's got no more guaranteed money left on his deal. What is it, like $2 million? And he's got 2 years left, this year and next year. And he's coming off of a 10-touchdown season. And so he obviously wants to be paid a little bit, which, hey, he has every right to. I agree with him. I think he deserves to get paid a little bit. What that price tag is, not up to me. I don't really care about that. That's between him and the Broncos. But I think he's a great option and a security blanket for a young quarterback like Bo Nix. And so if you lose that, I do worry about that, because then you go to Tim Patrick, who I think, when healthy, is a great, great security blanket. But the question is, how is he going to look coming off a back-to-back season-ending injuries in training camp? That's my only question that I have there. And then you add in Troy Franklin. You have Josh Reynolds, who's obviously a playmaker, can help out there. Marvin Mims. And then obviously you still have a little Jordan Humphrey in the mix. Brandon Johnson's still on the roster. He's a guy that I kind of forgot about a little bit over the course of this week. And Jalen Virgil's on the roster as well. So, for me, I look at all this and I think Denver's got a lot of questions here, but they also have a lot of options at wide receiver. How is this going to impact whether or not Cortland comes back or not? I think is really, at this point, it's going to boil down to, are the Broncos going to offer him something? And if they do, is it something that Cortland's willing to take? If not, could we still see him traded? I still think that's a very distinct possibility, potentially before training camp, to maybe keep an eye on here. But while we factor that into consideration as well, like there's obviously like edge rusher as well. Like they went out and they got Jonah Elliss with their second pick in the NFL draft, 76 overall in round number 3. My immediate question, and I texted you this the next morning, I said, what is the plan here with Drew Sanders now? Because nobody asked that question in the press conference. That after the Ellis draft pick happened, I immediately thought, like, what does this mean for Drew Sanders? Is he going back to inside linebacker, or is he going to stay at edge and maybe compete and maybe have to compete for his job next year? I mean, essentially, the more you look at it and the more we don't have answers, I don't want to say it, but I think a lot of people are looking at the Drew Sanders draft pick and they're thinking like, wow, this was a wasted pick, which I hope not, because I think Drew still has a lot of things you can develop, and I hope that the team is not giving up on him.
Right, and they're going to need him to play off-ball linebacker. I mean, that's just the reality. You lose Josie Jewell this year. Alex Singleton is a free agent after this year, if memory serves me correctly, Cody. So either that or the next year. So one of those two. I mean, it's going to require the Broncos to be forward thinking and getting Drew Sanders involved as quickly as possible, because man, he was the 67th overall pick last year. It's not like he was a late day 3 selection that everybody's kind of just been relying on without merit. I mean, he was a high 3rd round draft choice and a player that some people thought could go in the 1st round of the 2023 draft. So I think you need to get Drew Sanders ready. The coaching on that side of the ball has to be ready to involve him one way or the other. We know the Broncos like him as a pressure player, but he was able to do that at Arkansas as an off-ball linebacker. He didn't need to play the edge in order to provide pressure. So to me, I think you need him to dive headfirst into the off-ball linebacker position this offseason. Would have loved that clarity, as you got how many opportunities from this weekend to talk to those two guys, George Payton and Sean Payton. But man, I guess after rookie minicamp, maybe we'll have answers to that. But I think that's one of the factors I think could take this unit defensively to the next level. If Drew Sanders goes from being a major question mark to being he's a tremendous off-ball linebacker in year 2, this defense, Cody, is going to be elevated to another level.
Well, and it's like, is the vision from Sean Payton different from the vision that maybe Vance Joseph wants to use with his defense? Like, that is, I think, a worry. Some maybe, kind of contrast to maybe, make here. Will we see Drew Sanders at rookie minicamp? Like sometimes they'll invite like guys who were first-year players last year, like, hey, come get some extra work in, which, is great. But I mean, there's so many questions here, and we don't have a lot of answers about that. Maybe one we could answer. I mean, obviously the undrafted rookie free agent round, Denver has brought in, I think, a safety or two here, but still have to ask and wonder at this point, could Justin Simmons still maybe return here for the Broncos? I think there's still a distinct possibility that he certainly can. I know that the organization loves him. Justin loves it here in Denver. There's going to be some other teams that are going to have interest in him following the draft, but at this point, it's about evaluating your options. You're not going to get the big payday more than likely based on what we've seen from the safety market here. Justin's already got a big contract primarily, but now, what is next for Justin Simmons? I would love for Justin to come back here. I don't know how you feel about it.
I would love it, Cody. I think a lot of Broncos country. I tweeted something during day 3 of the draft, just a simple, now bring Justin Simmons back, or it's time to bring Justin Simmons back now. I mean, over 1,000 likes on it, on 42,000+ views. A lot of people reposting it. I mean, clearly the Broncos country is mostly on board, I would say. I mean, based on that one tweet, I guess it's a small portion of the fan base. But I think, look, you sent a message early this offseason, like, yeah, we're rebuilding. Then everybody ran with that. Now it's like, okay, you traded for John Franklin Myers and you drafted Bo Nix. You guys, your quarterback of the future. You've established the offensive line. You went out for all these other guys in free agency. Why would you not bring back Justin Simmons and let PJ Locke play some dime and some nickel and do these different types of things? I would love to see it. Everybody's wondering about roll and this, that, and the other. And do the Broncos even have cap space? Yes, they do have cap space. Roll, what are we talking about? This is the best safety in the game, potentially 30 interceptions, more than anybody since 2016. Let's not worry about his role in the defense. He's going to be the alpha dog. And that's what he is, Cody. That's what Justin Simmons is. We were all ticked off to see him let go in the first place. Felt like, man, you could find different ways to save $14 million. I hope that the Broncos are able to bring him back, and I hope that they want to bring him back. I hope Justin would want to come back. So that's where I'm at with it. I think it'd be a great idea, and it would really, it's not even just that it would be the cherry on top of this offseason, right? It's more so like somebody, gave you, they said, hey, we're going to have a 4-course meal, and the 4th course hasn't come out yet. It's like, okay, what's going to be the last one? This meal has been so good so far. What's the last course? Like that's what it would be like to me.
Well, Broncos Country, want to hear from you as well. Would you like to see Justin Simmons back in the fold? What are the biggest questions that you have remaining following the 2024 NFL Draft? Sayre Bedinger, myself, will be with you the entire week here. We're going to look at individual players that were drafted, build out whole entire episodes on them. Tomorrow's episode specifically for all you everydayers out there, the Broncos, they are rounding out and finalizing their undrafted rookie free agent class. Who could be the next undrafted gem that the Broncos do have in the mix? We'll break that down and much more on tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. We'll see you then.